My name is Mary Johnson. I'm turning 40 this year. Her father was divorced with a son from another marriage. The stepson is 19 now. I have been staying with him for like 5 years by now, and well, he is still not warming up to me. My husband and I were in an accident while out about a year ago. He didn't make it. After the accident effects stuck, and here I am in my wheelchair. After I had been in a wheelchair for a while, my stepson Kenny went on an extended road trip with his friends. He then casually chucked me and my wheelchair out onto the 30th floor balcony. She then responded, "Freeze to death and go there," shut the window and went over his trip. I couldn't understand what had happened at first. Just a few minutes before, I was relaxing and watching TV in the living room, and suddenly I was pushed onto the balcony in my wheelchair, unable to resist. I kept asking Kenny, "What are you doing? Where are you taking me?" But he ignored me and threw me onto the balcony. It was early December, and it was very cold outside. Moreover, I was only in my house clothes, so it felt even colder. Once thrown onto the balcony, I couldn't stand up on my own. I shouted, "Help, help," several times, but Kenny ignored me and left for his trip. Living on the 30th floor of a high-rise, my cries for help couldn't reach anyone outside. Besides, it being December, there were hardly any people out on their balconies. All I could do was hope that miraculously someone from a neighboring apartment or from a floor above or below would come out onto their balcony. However, the apartments are spaced well apart, so even if someone were on their balcony, they might not hear me. Lying there in my wheelchair, unable to raise my voice much, I thought this might be the end for me, and wondered how things had come to this. I thought about my life, and how it wasn't supposed to be like this, and tears naturally started to flow. Before meeting my husband, I was enjoying my single life living alone. I was good at household chores and cooking, but I didn't have much desire to marry until I was past 30. I had more fun hanging out with friends and enjoyed my job, so I wasn't that interested in romance or marriage. However, as my friends started getting married and having children, I found myself growing apart from them. Even though I didn't have a strong desire to marry, I started feeling lonely and began to want a partner. That's when I met my husband. I met him while having a drink alone at a bar. He happened to sit next to me, and we hit it off. He was divorced and had been raising Kenny on his own as a single father. I admired how he had already experienced marriage and was raising a child by himself at our age while running his own business. He managed to balance work and parenting. He would humbly say it wasn't a big deal because he had the help of his parents at his in-laws' house. I loved that modest side of him. He told me he got divorced just before Kenny started elementary school. I didn't ask for details, but apparently, his ex-wife left almost like eloping, and he ended up raising Kenny without any custody battle. Kenny had often expressed a desire to see his mother, but he never got the chance. His father always said that his ex-wife was unfit to be a mother and didn't want Kenny to see her. Maybe he didn't want Kenny to go to her if he asked, probably because it would make him feel lonely. I thought that was the real reason he was so adamant about not letting Kenny see his ex-wife. When I remarried my husband, Kenny was right in the midst of his adolescence. Despite his constant wishes to see his mom, he was introduced to a new mother, me. He was very cold and didn't accept me. I didn't expect to be accepted right away, and at first, I didn't mind and focused on housework and cooking. I quit my job to be a full-time homemaker, supporting my husband and raising Kenny. That was my job, and I worked hard at it. I asked my husband about Kenny's favorites and tried to make things he liked, hoping to get accepted by him sooner, but he didn't warm up to me, and it was disheartening. Even after years, he never warmed up to me, and my heart broke many times. "You went into my room without permission. Don't ever come in again. Make sure to iron my uniform shirt properly. Don't talk to me so familiarly, fake mom." These harsh words had become a part of my daily life. I tried to convince myself it was just his rebellious phase, but there were days when I ended up crying alone. My husband would always scold Kenny firmly for such behavior and comforted me each time I was mistreated. He was a kind and appreciative husband, thanking me every day for marrying him and taking on the role of a full-time homemaker, especially since we had a child. But then my husband died in an accident, leaving just Kenny and me behind. Kenny couldn't forgive that I was the only one who survived the accident. At the funeral, he caused a scene, yelling, "It's her fault Dad died." From there, his disdain for me became even more apparent. Before, despite his rebelliousness and harsh words, we still had conversations, occasionally ate together, and even went out as a family, albeit rarely. But after the accident, he mostly ignored me at home. He didn't want to eat with me, so I would prepare meals and take them to his room. After graduating high school, he became a part-timer. He doesn't contribute financially to the household, and sometimes he would ask for money for his leisure, which was the only time we talked. A normal parent might say things like, "I can't give you so much money," or "You should contribute some of your earnings to the household," but I couldn't say those things for fear of being disliked even more. For a while after the accident, my in-laws and my parents took turns coming over to help take care of me. Thanks to the high-rise condo and inheritance my husband left behind, I could live without working, and I even had enough to remodel the apartment for my wheelchair. I got used to the wheelchair and managing most things on my own, which meant less frequent visits from my parents and in-laws. And then, just when things seemed to be getting on track, Kenny threw me onto the balcony. I had no visitors scheduled for the next few days, and my phone was inside the house, so I had almost given up hope of being rescued when suddenly the balcony door opened, and I heard my mother's voice. "Are you okay? What happened?" I was so relieved that I burst into tears. She had come because she thought it was strange that I wasn't answering her calls. I explained to her that Kenny had thrown me out onto the balcony. Maybe he thought he'd get the inheritance if I was gone, or maybe he just wanted to live with his real mother, or perhaps he just found me annoying. I don't know, but my son nearly killed me. My mother was shocked when she heard this, but she seemed to have an idea and made a suggestion. When Kenny returned from his trip 9 days later, he noted how unusually clean the house was. He felt something was off and went to check the balcony, but I wasn't there. Kenny probably thought I had died. He was stunned for a while, realizing that all my belongings were gone from the house. I decided to move to my childhood home following my mother's suggestion. "You can't live here anymore. We don't know what might happen next. Just come to our house. You've been living in this high-rise, struggling with your wheelchair life, just to be with Kenny, right? But if Kenny says he doesn't need you, then you don't have to hesitate to come back to us. We are here for you," my mother said, and I cried again, feeling relieved. Kenny had always talked about wanting to live with his real mother, and my husband was worried about it. He had even said, "If something happens to me, it's okay to leave Kenny with his real mother." By that time, Kenny was already over 18, so even if his real mother had neglected him, he would survive, and my husband wanted me to prioritize Kenny's wishes to meet his mother. I had talked about this with my mother before, so she suggested that we let his real mother take care of him. "Why don't you fulfill Kenny's wish to see his real mom? Your husband was adamant about not letting him meet her, and maybe you're carrying too much burden by yourself, thinking you have to do the same and keep living with Kenny." I was surprised at how accurately she hit the mark. "How did you know what I was feeling?" "Well, I'm your mother. I had always thought you were reluctant to contact his real mother. Your husband had already said it was okay to let him meet her, but for some reason, you continued living with Kenny, so I thought maybe you were being stubborn. But what Kenny did this time is beyond a rebellious phase. It's inexcusable. I can't stay silent after he put my precious daughter through such an ordeal. I think it's time to grant Kenny's wish and let you live your life happily. Even if his real mother was the worst, if Kenny happily goes to her, I'm okay with that. Encouraged by my mother, I made up my mind and contacted Kenny's real mother to take care of him. His real mother seemed very happy to have Kenny come home. I conveyed this to Kenny over the phone, and he seemed pleased. I gave him his real mother's new name, address, and phone number. I'm glad you get to go to your real mom's. I'm going to sell the high-rise, okay? I said. I don't have to live with the fake mom anymore. Do whatever you want. By the way, you're still alive. I don't think we'll ever meet again, but take care, Kenny said before hanging up. There was no apology in the end, but I felt so relieved knowing I wouldn't have to meet Kenny again. I think I got used to the sarcasm and harsh treatment, being treated almost like a servant for about 5 years living with Kenny, so it didn't hurt anymore. But now that I don't have to see him again, it's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. My body and mind feel lighter. It's been years since I felt this exhilaration. I'm glad I contacted his real mom. Thank you so much, Mom. Mary, you've been so down. I was really worried and wanted you to come back home, but you were trying so hard for Kenny, I couldn't bring it up. Let's live happily together from now on. I was excited at the thought of being able to do what I love and live my life. Marrying my husband wasn't a mistake, but I think experiencing marriage once is enough for me. I decided to enjoy my single life again and lifted my ban on alcohol. When Kenny was here, I thought I might need to take him to the hospital if he suddenly got sick, so I didn't drink. This is the best drink I've had in a long time. You really did a great job as a mother for Kenny. I'm proud of you. I was embarrassed but happy to be praised by my mother. I realized that Kenny had been the center of my life without me noticing. I never got called Mom, but I might have given him more love than a real son. Thinking back on being thrown onto the balcony, it was indeed tough, but now I enjoyed my first drink in a long time. About a month into my life at my parents' house, I received a call from Kenny. Hey, I want to come back. What happened? You finally got to meet the mother you've always wanted to see. Kenny called to say he wanted to come back, even though not much time had passed. When I asked about the situation, it turned out his biological mother was worse than he had imagined. I was relieved. After talking to her on the phone, she seemed like a bright and kind person, but she had a reason for welcoming Kenny so warmly. She knew from our phone conversation that my husband had passed away, so she assumed Kenny might have inherited something. That's why she welcomed him, eyeing the inheritance. Unaware of this, Kenny was initially happy to reunite with his mother, but he soon realized she was only interested in money. She talked about nothing but money, showing no joy in their reunion. After living there for a few days, he understood that she had welcomed him just for his inheritance. Her husband didn't hold a job for long, and their savings were almost gone. They already had 3 kids, and their household was struggling financially. Now, with Kenny, there were 6 of them. You're staying here, so you should give us the inheritance you got, his mother and her husband told him, and within a few days, they took almost all of his inheritance. Kenny initially thought it was fair to give them the inheritance since he was staying with them. However, he was completely out of his element living there and found it hard to adjust. When Kenny lived with me, I always made sure to prepare his favorite dishes and balanced meals, but at his mother's, they mostly ate ramen noodles. The kids were used to it and happily ate them, but for Kenny, who was used to a well-rounded meal, this was a shock. Their idea of eating out was mostly junk food, not restaurants. The nutrition was highly unbalanced, and he started feeling unwell after just a few days. I realized that you were always careful about nutritional balance. I used to just eat whatever I wanted with my friends, not thinking about vegetables or anything. But now, living like this, I understand how lucky I was to have someone care about my diet. The kids who are used to this lifestyle seem fine, but it's definitely not good for their health. and I think it'll catch up with them eventually. I had never been to a supermarket before, but felt a crisis for my health. I went to buy vegetables for the first time. I even tried cooking. I did it secretly because if my mom saw me, she'd probably expect me to cook from now on. But I couldn't make anything nearly as delicious as your cooking. I tried to feed it to the kids, but they're not used to eating vegetables and refused to eat it at all. Being rejected even before they tried my cooking was really tough. Kenny shared that when we were living together, it was common for him to eat out without telling me, and then say he didn't need dinner. I would just have his portion for my lunch the next day. But it seems like he's finally realized how hard that was for me, and I'm glad to see he's grown a bit. I finally understood how hard it is to plan meals and go grocery shopping. It's tough to make even one dish, let alone several. I appreciated how amazing it was that you did that for me, someone who's not even your biological son. How could you do all that? Now I realize how incredible what you did was. Why did I do it? Well, even though you always called me a fake mom, to me, you were my real son. It's natural for a mother to care about her son's health and make him proper meals, I said. Kenny seemed very emotional and started crying over the phone. After a while, he continued talking. I had thought our relationship was over, but I couldn't help listening to him, especially since he sounded so distressed. Now they're even asking for my part-time earnings. I work 5 days a week, but my wage isn't high, and after taxes, there's not much left. I told them that, but they said we're a family, and we should help each other out during tough times. Now, most of my earnings go to them. I hardly have any money left, and I can't hang out with my friends like before. But you gave them all your inheritance, right? That was a significant amount. They shouldn't need any more money from you. I think they're saving it somewhere, but they keep saying they have no money. Both of them work, so they can't be that broke. If they're just eating ramen noodles, they shouldn't be spending that much, right? Why are they taking so much money from you? I don't know, but those two drink a lot. They feed the kids ramen noodles, but buy lots of snacks for themselves to drink every night. They seem to be having a great time. When they both have a day off, they leave the kids with me and go to the casino all day. They say they mostly win, so they're not losing money, but I think they're actually spending a lot there. I once said they could save money if they stopped gambling and drinking. They got really angry and hit me. They were drunk and didn't hold back. It hurt a lot. I had never been hit by anyone before, so it was tough. Kenny had been abused by his mother and her husband, but what you said wasn't wrong, right? Why should you be hit for that? They say they need gambling and drinking to deal with the stress of daily work. Even if they stop, those living costs money, so they say I should contribute my earnings. They tell me I don't understand because I'm just a kid and that I should earn money and contribute to the family. Listening to Kenny's story was disheartening. It's sad to see a child having to sacrifice so much. The problems didn't stop there. Since Kenny arrived, his mother and her husband started going to the casino more often, leaving him to take care of the 3 younger kids. He struggled with the kids jumping on him, doodling on his belongings, and having to break up their fights. Kenny, who had been spoiled as an only child, was experiencing not getting his way for the first time. Among the 3 children at his biological mother's home, one of them didn't warm up to Kenny at all. They ignored him when he talked and would snap at him, saying things like, "Get out of here, you make it too crowded." Kenny realized just how hurtful such behavior could be, as he had treated me the same way before. Every time I see that kid who won't warm up to me, I feel like I'm looking at myself. Being ignored hurts more than I expected. Dad and you never ignored me no matter how rebellious I was. You always faced me and prioritized my feelings. I've only now come to appreciate that, Kenny said, sounding completely changed and remorseful. It's only been about a month, right? I went through 5 years of you not warming up to me, and it was extremely hard. Toward the end, we hardly even talked. Living with someone like that was really tough, not to mention I was struggling physically with my paralysis and mentally with the loss of your father. Being constantly told to bring Dad back was almost too much for me. I shared these thoughts with Kenny, remembering the past. I'm really sorry. I finally understand how awful I was. Please let me have another chance, he pleaded. But I simply asked, is that all the complaints about your current home? I was already fed up with hearing about his troubles at his biological mother's house, but Kenny insisted he had more to share. It's not just that. My mom never cleans the house, so it's always dusty and suffocating. I never did any cleaning when I lived with you, but now I've developed a rash-like allergy from the dust and house mites. So I started doing all the house cleaning. I wish my mom would do it, but she says it's only my problem since I'm the one with the rash. And I'm sleeping in the same room with the 3 kids. They snore and move a lot, so I haven't been sleeping well. I'm used to a quiet, private space, and it's been really tough. Every day, I just want to escape this life. Kenny sounded extremely distressed by his current living situation. My late husband knew his ex-wife was like this, and didn't want Kenny to meet her. I always thought he didn't want Kenny to be taken away, and accused him of that once, but then he told me how terrible she was. They had a shotgun wedding, and never lived together before marriage. After getting married and having Kenny, my husband realized she never did any housework. My husband's business was starting to take off, and he was extremely busy with work. Despite this, when he came home, he took care of all the household chores and looked after Kenny, which meant he hardly got any sleep. During the day, my in-laws, concerned about Kenny, would come to check on him. Despite being a full-time housewife, his ex-wife hardly took care of him and was reckless with money. Stressed about not being able to go to the casino after the birth of their child, she went on a shopping spree with my husband's money. I had heard all this from my husband, so after he passed away, I tried my best to raise Kenny on my own, but I found out that Kenny had come to resent me to the extent of trying to kill me. My mother suggested, since it was Kenny's wish, that I should let him go, so I decided to distance myself from Kenny. I never knew my real mother was such a terrible person. I want to escape this life and come back home. Kenny seemed to think it was natural for me to welcome him back. Where will you go back to? I told you to do whatever you want, so our house is no longer available. What? You said to do whatever I want, right? And after being thrown off the balcony and left there, I can't live with you anymore. I'm really sorry about that time. Kenny had been angry at me all this time for supposedly ruining the chance for his father and ex-wife to reconcile. I was so wrong. I realize now how much I took things for granted. I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I understand you've reflected, but there's no home for us to live together anymore. And you're 19 and an adult now, so please feel free to live your life. I said that, and hung up the phone. Kenny decided to live on his own, escaping from his mother's home. His mother and her husband, realizing they would be in trouble without Kenny helping with the house and contributing money, tried hard to stop him from leaving. You should only have one home, right here. Let's live together, they sweet-talked him, but Kenny, feeling he would go insane if he continued living there, firmly left. However, with my husband's inheritance gone, he couldn't afford a luxurious lifestyle anymore. He had to transition from a wealthy life in a high-rise to a life of poverty, realizing how privileged his previous life had been. The mother he had longed to meet turned out to be toxic, and Kenny was shocked by this revelation. Even after leaving her home, she frequently called him, asking for money. I explained everything to my in-laws, including being thrown off the balcony and letting Kenny meet his biological mother. They reflected on having spoiled their grandson too much and apologized to me. Deciding that Kenny needed to learn the hardships of life, they chose to quietly watch over him without intervening. As for me, I'm living a happy life at my parents' house, relieved from the responsibilities of parenting.